Dame Janet Bostwick is known as a model politician and pioneer among women in the Bahamas. Admired and respected as a champion for the empowerment of women not only in the Bahamas but internationally. Besides being an exceptional politician, the Right Honourable Dame Janet Bostwick has the distinction of having achieved several firsts in her career. These firsts include the first woman Member of Parliament in the Bahamas, first woman Attorney General, and first woman to serve as acting Prime Minister. Thus, our discussion tonight is entitled Dame Janet Bostwick, a first in Bahamian politics. And naturally, our guest is the Dame herself. I'm your host, Jerome Sawyer. We'll see you on the other side this spring. You're watching On the Record. Welcome back. As said, tonight our guest is Dame Janet Bostwick, who is a decorated politician and the first in many areas. Now, Dame Janet, you were recently honoured by CARICOM. Let's take a look at that moment.
Her name is synonymous with so many firsts, and her reputation is forever tied to national development and the advancement of women. A model politician and pioneer for women's rights and equality across the region. She took her plight for women to the highest levels on the world stage, from the United Nations to CARICOM nations. Dame Janet Bostwick experienced many firsts as a woman.
I felt an awesome responsibility, indeed. When my people were celebrating, I slipped from the celebrations and went into my office, and in the dark I got on my knees and I wept.
Her legal profession started off as a stenographer in the legal department. She then moved up through the ranks and was called to the Bahamas Bar in April of 1971 and served as a Crown prosecutor from 1972 to 1974. Bostwick is a former acting magistrate and served as the president of the Bahamas Bar Association. The former senator also served as an attorney general, Minister of Justice and Immigration, and Minister of Foreign Affairs.
In the House of Assembly, during the 97 to 2002 period, we established a prayer group, and we used to meet early on Wednesday mornings.
She was sworn in as Minister of Foreign Affairs on March 18, 1997, after winning a fourth term as a Member of Parliament for the Yamakra constituency under the Free National Movement. She's seen a lot and weathered many storms as a woman in politics.
Women have to realize that they do not have to be like men in order to be successful in whatever endeavor.
This award is for a woman who is a respected champion for other women with a rich legacy that has helped to advance all people of the Bahamas and the region.
Dame Janet Bostwick, that story only scratches the surface of who you are. Looking at that piece and all of your accomplishments, most recently the honouring of CARICOM in February, what was that moment like for you when the region came and said, well done, thank you?
I can't really explain how very honoured I felt, and also so very humbled, because, as you said, it was the region. And I suppose when you reach the age that I have reached, and you have not sought honors. It is somewhat of a surprise, but a very pleasant one to be honored, and to be honored not only by your own, but by the region as a whole.
I want to sort of get our conversation started with where it all began. What was it that really inspired you to get into politics and to start that journey when you had what seemed to be a successful law career already?
Well, politics came almost simultaneously with the law. But let me tell you, I was born and, well, I grew up in East Street, just opposite Windsor Park. And Windsor Park, you know, in the 50s was like the hub of activities for labor movement and for politics. You had so many rallies there, so many meetings. And my father was very active in the taxi cab union. He was active in the strike of 58. I started to work in 1957 at the Attorney General's office, and immediately I joined the Public Service Association. We couldn't have unions then. We had a Public Service Association. And so I became involved as a trade unionist in seeking the rights of others, particularly the rights of our women in the public service. I continued in the Attorney General's office. I got promoted, as you know, from secretary to administrator. And I was actually supposed to be going away. I was one of the 4 persons chosen to do a course in public administration, either at the University of Manchester or the University of the West Indies. I was very delighted and wanted to go, and my husband felt, no, how could you do this? Because he had just returned from school. It was like the year before, and we had just had Kelly, our second child. So I said, what should I do? And John Henry says, study law. That would have been in 1966. I became articled to the Attorney General, still then active in the union.
Where did frontline politics begin? How did you get there?
After the leaving the public service in 1974, in 1975, was asked to speak at an F&M convention, giving the vote of thanks to Kendall Isaacs. I had worked with him in the Attorney General's office for a long time. He was now leader. I did that vote of thanks, and I got somewhat carried away and did not stick to the script. You know, I was speaking of why we needed to have a united F&M. Even at that time, we were F&M is famous for fighting. But at the end of that, I was actually lifted from the stage, and this is at British Colonial. And from then, I was being pressured by the party to try and take a frontline position in politics. I didn't want to do it. But when we came to the position where I felt that the governing party, the Progressive Liberal Party, was moving dangerously to a type of socialism that you had in Cuba and that Jamaica was moving to. We'd come to the place where we were purchasing all the hotels. We had purchased the Bank of Montreal. We had purchased the Harrisville farm. The government was becoming the big employer.
Why did that make you so uncomfortable?
Because I was committed to individual enterprise. And I felt that this was dangerously threatening that. Everybody was looking to the government for work. They were looking to government for any upward mobility. The government was more than the big brother. It was like the father of everything, controlling everything. And I saw a depreciation of the natural instinct for persons to try and achieve on their own. And I wanted to be against it. And Henry said, put your money where your mouth is. And
Get into politics.
yes.
What was it like for a woman now to want to or to enter frontline politics? You've now traversed through the public service and what was then, I guess, the early days, the beginnings of unionized public service, but now frontline politics you're entering. What was it like for a woman and a black woman?
Well, no white woman was interested, or no white Bahamian-born woman, as far as I remember, was interested in politics in those days. They supported their husbands. But also, black women felt that, in the main, felt that politics was not a woman's business at all. It felt that you were there to support your husband. And I was discouraged by the matriarchs of the Bahamas. If you look at our history and look at what happened, you'll see that Dame Doris Johnson was like in a position in class all by herself. And I don't think that she really got the support of the leading women as one would have thought that she ought to have done.
But that's strange because at that time I thought women's suffrage was really strong, and it would seem that it was.
It was, but it was for the purpose of assisting our men to become the leaders of the country, never for women to themselves walk side by side with men and take over leadership of the country. It was to assist the men, and in this instance, mostly to assist the PLP men in achieving the government. And they did that.
Let's fast forward to 1982, to the 82 election. You offered yourself and you won. The first woman to win an election and to be elected to Parliament. What was that moment like for you?
I was awestruck. It was something for which I fought, but when I achieved it, it was realizing that herein was an awesome responsibility. I knew that I was the only woman elected. Miss Bridgewater, she had run for the PLP, and I thought she had a better chance of winning than I did. But I was the only woman elected to Parliament, and I knew that on my shoulders, or I felt that on my shoulders, rests the future of women in politics. And if I did not perform well, then it was going to hurt the movement for many, many years to come.
What was it like the moment you walked into the House of Assembly for the first time?
Surreal, surreal. My party, I remember we walked from our office in George Street, all of the elected members, and that was in 1962. There was 11 of us. In 1982, elected to Parliament, we walked down Bay Street. And there was a very, very large turnout of FNM supporters, particularly our youth and women who were there to cheer us on and to cheer me on. And I could hear the ring, Janet, who we want. And I was walking, and it was me walking to Parliament with our men and with my husband, who was also being appointed to the Senate at the time, because he had not won his seat in Andros. I walked over to the Senate with him, where he was sworn in, and then I walked over to the House of Assembly. And I walked in the bar, across the bar. And as I did that, it was occurring to me and saying to me, no woman has done this before, you know. And it was surreal. And I walked over and took the oath and felt that now that ceiling has been broken. And I'm the first, but there's going to be so many more, so many more.
Surreal. I can only imagine. I want you to take us back to the politics of the 80s and even into the 90s. The 82 election, you were elected, your party lost. 87, the party lost again. But what were those times like in politics? And even for you, you're that voice of women in Parliament, that sole voice for such a long time. But what was it like? What was the Bahamian political landscape like, particularly in the 80s?
In the 80s, there were so many things which were happening. First of all, what was it like being a member of the opposition? This is when the PLP was at its strongest. The PLP was the party which brought us a political awareness in the country. To go against the PLP was going against Bahamians and black Bahamians in particular.
Did they see you as being anti-Bahamian?
They said you were they called me anti-Clo, you know, and that was a very, very, very painful thing, because the FNM was what we call all together, you know, and we had joined together with the UBP had joined with us. The majority of them had joined with us. And so we were called traitors. I was called anti-Clo, and Henry was Uncle Tom and all this. And to stand in that position was in itself very, very, very challenging. And so you had to fight against the rejection of people who felt that you had betrayed them, and at the same time promote those things which you felt and which we felt very strongly ought to have been promoted. We were concerned that the PLP was turning more to be a cult than a party, and that there was like worship of one leader, and that democracy was under threat. We felt that.
How do you, or what was the thinking at the time when obviously the majority at that time was in support, whether it be on the political front or even from the population side? But how did you manage to overcome that, moving towards your win in the 90s?
How did I manage to overcome that?
How did the party deal with that?
Well, the party continued. It continued. We felt that a number of programs were good, but methods were bad. And the party kept to its focus on what its program was. And we were able to convince the populace that we could do it so much better. And I think we achieved that.
What would you say were some of the turning points, though, that really convinced the public that there was a better alternative?
There were a number of things. As you know, in the 70s and in the 80s, drug was very prevalent in the country. And you had the Norman's Key story with Joe Leader.
That resulted in the whole Nation for Sale
Nation for Sale with
documentary,
Brian Ross, yes.
on NBC.
And yes, and then you had the Commission of Inquiry, and the Commission of Inquiry had a scathing report and condemnation of the government, really. And there were a number of stories actually attached with the leader. And we felt that this was the time for the FNM, and we felt that the FNM had more than a good chance. It was the situation with Chana, who resigned his position, Hubert Ingram.
Chana being late Adiana.
Adiana, yes.
He resigned
yes.
he was deputy?
He was deputy
Prime
at that
Minister at the
time, yes. And then you had Hubert Ingram and Perry Christie, who were first of all suspended and then expelled from the party.
Sitting ministers at the time.
All of them sitting ministers. And you had the situation with the third force and the collaboration and cooperation between the three of them and the FNM. All of that we felt more than put us in a position to win the 87 election.
I'm going to hit a pause right there. We've got to take a break, and when we come back, we'll pick up on the 87 election, which was very, very significant. So stay with us. We're going to have more of our conversation with Dame Janet Bostwick on the record right after this. Dame Janet Bostwick, a first in Bahamian politics, is our topic tonight. And of course, our guest is Dame Janet Bostwick as well to tell her story. Welcome back to our show. Dame Janet, before we continue with our story, I think it's important we give a little context. We thought it important to really start talking about who we are and where we've come in these 50 years of our independence. And as we get ready to celebrate that independence, we thought it important to bring individuals like yourself who have been such an integral part of the development of our country, particularly in politics, but you've done so much more than just been a political figure, and we'll talk about that a little later. But as we went into the break, we were talking about the 1980s, or getting set to talk about the 1987 general election, and where your party was positioned at that time in what I describe as probably one of the more controversial elections of our time. But take us back to that period and what happened.
In 1987, as we mentioned before, you had the three ministers. Hannah, still a member of the Progressive Liberal Party and running in Anstown, and the FNM taking the decision not to oppose Mr. Hannah. And so he was, in fact, unopposed. Then you had the independents, Hubert Ingram and Perry Christie, and the FNM supported them and did not have candidates running against them in their constituencies. Because of what had been happening in the country and the dissatisfaction of what we thought was the majority of persons with the performance of the Progressive Liberal Party, and because of its international reputation, or the tarnishing of the international reputation of the Bahamas by the performance of the government, we felt that we were in a position to win. We felt certain that we would win. It was the most controversial election ever.
Why?
It was the most controversial election because it was difficult. It was absolutely impossible even to get registers, certified registers, up to, in some instances, the day before the election. And so we couldn't say if persons who were on the register ought to have been on the register, or if persons who ought to have been there were not there. You couldn't say. You didn't have a register to compare it with. And we believe that a lot of fraudulent voting took place.
Do you think it was deliberate or just incompetence?
It was a combination. It was a combination. Because we did not run or contest the seat in Anstown, it made Anstown's persons available to vote and register and vote in a number of other constituencies.
Wow.
And we believe that that took place. We more than believe, we know that it took place. We also know that there was voting more than once in a number of areas. You vote in one constituency and then you go and vote in another. But you didn't have the registers, and so you could not prove this or challenge voters before. We won there were 48, I believe, 48 or 49 seats. We won 49 seats. There were 2 independents, and the PLP won 31. The FNM contested an unprecedented
It was a
number,
huge amount going to election.
Something. I think it must be more than 20 or something, which were contested. We had good information. When we went into the 87 election, our leader was Kendall Isaacs. During the period after that, Kendall stepped down and Cecil became our leader.
I want to just pause right there. Several things happened after that election. Obviously, the party thought that they were on course to win. You didn't. But some things started to change within country. Because of all these allegations of election fraud and fraudulent activities, some things started to happen. You started to push for some things. One ended up resulting in the indelible ink that we still now use. I think that came later on.
That came in 1992.
Right, which was during the time you now had a new leader. Leader at the time, Sir Cecil died in office, I think in 1991. And then you elected a new leader.
In 1990?
1990.
In 1990, Hubert Ingram joined the FNM. I remember that after Sir Cecil's death, of course, Hubert became our leader.
How was that? I'm very curious because now here you have a former PLP chairman and cabinet minister who has ascended to leader of the FNM, who in office he had been opposing all these years, but now he was your leader.
I remember that as a PLP cabinet minister, Hubert Ingram was one of the most approachable, if not the most approachable. He was a person who was willing to work across the lines. I remember I was shadow minister for housing and the social services and all this, and it was possible to sit down with him and have decisions, and you were not totally rebuffed, you know. It was easy, and so many things which he wished and to which he aspired were same things which I personally did and a number of us. And so it was an easy fit, an easy marriage.
1992.
But before we get
Sure.
there, the successor had been ill for some time, and the FNM was doing rather well at that stage, under the leadership, de facto leadership, of Orville Turnquest. And Orville seemed to be, at that time, the person who would be leading us into election. And then Hubert joined. And what we felt was that although we were progressing, we were not progressing at the level that was necessary for us to ensure that we could win the next election. We had to attract PLPs. Yes, we had to attract them.
And Ingram did that?
Ingram did that.
Take us to 1992.
Before we go to 1992, just let me very quickly
Sure,
say
go
to
ahead.
you, you talked about the indelible ink and all
Yes.
like this. When Hubert Ingram became leader of our party, one of the things which he did was to, and I happened to be a part of that delegation, we formed the delegation which went to a number of the CARICOM countries, Jamaica, Barbados, Guyana and stuff. We went to find out what was their program and what did they do with regard to elections and a number of other things. And one of the things which was promoted particularly by Barbados was the indelible ink. And this is something which the FNM fought for with the Progressive Liberal Party to bring that in.
As an opposition party.
As an opposition party. And we were very pleased when they accepted it, you see.
Take us now to 1992. You have a party that's been in office from 1967, taken the country through majority rule, taken the country through independence, but you have managed to defeat that party, changing government for the first time since 67. What was that like for you?
Euphoric. It was something which we expected, but it was incredible, you know. We had a taste of what it was like prior to that when we had the by-elections in Grand Bahama for Cecil's seat. That was the hardest fought by-election in the history of the Bahamas. Our candidate was Lil David. When we said Lil David was going against Goliath. And the two leaders of the party accepted that whoever, or they said, because both of them felt that they were going to win, whoever won this, and
That would be it.
yeah, you know.
We've got to take a break right here, but we're going to continue that discussion right after this. Stay with us. We'll have more on our discussion with Dame Janet Bostwick right after. You're watching On the Record, and welcome back. Let's get right back to our conversation with Dame Janet Bostwick. Dame Janet, you sat as a minister in an administration that served 2 consecutive terms, 1992 and then again from 1997 onwards. That has not been repeated in that period. What are some of the things that you can recall that you are most proud of in your time in government?
I think the first thing was that new administration was able to regain the reputation or reestablish the good reputation of the Bahamas. We came in with the nation for sale on your back. And good and decent investors were not interested in doing business in the Bahamas. And it was a hard job to convince them that it was not business as usual. And we did this, the Prime Minister led delegations, as you know, throughout Europe and throughout America and South America, trying to convince that it was in fact a new day.
To borrow a phrase.
In the Bahamas. And we were able to do that. And you remember in 1992, the unemployment rate was 14.8%. By 1997, it was 9.8, I think. It had gone down 5%, which was a great thing. Also, people had a different feeling. You know, there was a happiness in the country which was not there before. I remember a number of persons saying to me that they would travel before, and when asked, where are you from? They say, from the Bahamas, because they were ashamed of the nation for sale and the drug. Then it was felt abroad that all Bahamians were involved in this. And there was a difference now. You could hold your head up and say, I'm from the Bahamas.
The voters gave the FNM a second go at it in '97, in the '97 election. Why do you think that was?
Because I think we were delighted to run on our record. And our record was good. The employment, as I said, crime was down. We'd built new schools, a number of new schools. The conditions of schools had been improved. The public service had been revamped, and there had been a number of promotions. The police had cars for the first time. There were a number of things which we did, which persons were very, very pleased about. Small things, like lights over the hill, you know, lights in my constituency for the first time, like water in so many of the family islands, and things that made them feel that you were for them. And it was a record which was worthy.
One of the things that people don't talk much about anymore, but happened during that '97 campaign, was the murder of a sitting minister in the late Chuck Virgil that happened at the height of the '97 election campaign, February of '97.
In February of 1987.
What was that like for you and the government and his colleagues at the time?
I still can't describe it, you know. And it was, we felt that it was no murders necessary, but we felt that if the opposition then party had dealt with the campaigning in a different manner, Chuck would have been alive.
You felt that it was a result of the political campaign?
We felt that it was connected. You remember that Chuck had been identified. First of all, the PLP were alleging that we were buying the election. And they said that we were spending a lot of money to buy election. Chuck was our campaign manager, and he was publicly identified as the man who was carrying the bag with lots of money. And we felt that that had something to do with him being abducted after a rally, a FNM rally, and being found.
Abducted at his doorstep.
At his doorstep and killed two. And I still marveled at the fact, because that could have been an event which was a catalyst for an explosive, violent election. And I marvel at the fact that that did not happen. And I attribute it much to Hubert Ingram because he was careful to try and lower the temperature. And so instead of retaliation, which a number of F&M felt that it should happen, whether or not was right, that's what they felt. Instead of retaliation, what our thing was that we will win this one for Chuck, you know.
I want to talk about your work with advancing the rights of women in this country and some of the things that you have done, obviously being that first female voice and face in Parliament. Again, what are some of the things that you are most proud of that you were helped to able to achieve for women in this country?
Well, the greatest thing is not something which you can really, the fact that I think that my election and my position in government and in Parliament has inspired a number of women who would not have thought about it before to say, if Janet did it, we can do it. And a number of women are now making it their goal. That is the greatest thing ever.
Did you feel that burden when you were in Parliament?
Yes. Yes. And it was, please, Lord, help me. You know, yes. And I also, I always felt that I was not there representing FNN women. I was there representing the women of the Bahamas. I still feel that.
Did women, and by the time you're getting well into your tenure, you have the election of more women in Parliament, and you see your counterparts, whether they're on the same side or across the aisle. Did you all work together as a parliamentary caucus to try and get things done?
I can't say we worked together as a parliamentary caucus, but I know that I worked with women from the other side. I worked very closely with women from the other side, and we had an organization in the 80s. It was Caribbean Women for Democracy, and I was in the beginning, and I was, as a member of the opposition, the only member of our Bahamas who was in that, and it was a group of women parliamentarians and leading women politicians from all of the English-speaking CARICOM countries. And we met for the promotion of women in politics. And I invited Ruby Ann Darling to be active in that group. I ended up being chairman or president of that group. And it was one of the things which united us. And so you had women from the FNM and the PLP. We would go to meetings in Antigua or Jamaica or things, and we worked together.
These are the things the public never saw. And I think that's something that is missed on what women bring to politics, that ability to work together across these lines.
And Ruby Ann invited me to be, she used to be invited to the National Congressional breakfast. And she took...
In the U.S. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and she took me along. Me and Ruby Ann, we have a very close association, and me and Mother Pratt, and we're close,
And both of you were on. I have to admit, in an earlier clip, both of you agreed to come on one of our very first shows we did on women in politics. And so even then, I felt the camaraderie between you. I want to bring our discussion a little bit closer, really, to independence and where we are. We are weeks away from celebrating our 50th anniversary as an independent nation. What are some of the things that you are most proud of that we've been able to achieve in these 50 years?
I am very proud of our stability. Many countries do not have that. I'm proud that in politics we still have a government, a black government. Uh, uh, and I'm proud that it's no longer a black, although it's black, but we're more all together. We're working more all together as a people. I'm proud of having achieved a greater standard of life. I am concerned that in some respects our quality of life has suffered. I am concerned about our loss of civility, particularly in Parliament, the loss of civility. I'm concerned about the feeling in the country of us and them in political spheres, and also with class, us and them. There is not the unity of the Bahamians.
What happened? And I want to talk about the civility and the us and them, because I say it all the time on here. I think we have just lost a lot of what it means to be Bahamian, because we weren't like this as a people.
Not
we weren't on
always.
each other's throats at the drop of a dime. And you're right, that us and them separation seems to be growing. What happened in your view?
I don't know, quite frankly, you know. I don't know. I thought that after the 2 terms of the FNM, because the FNM tried very hard to bring in a new culture and a culture of Bahamians working together, and we actually paid a price for it, because it was felt that we did not take proper care of our own.
That's a big criticism even today. People feel that they are entitled to things because of their support.
Yes, yes. And you can understand it. Because if you have a system where, because of your support of a particular party, you have paid a price from the other party, and then your party gets in, and your party is saying it's for all of us, then you still are left behind, you see? So it's something which it's not easy to overcome, and I'm not certain what is the answer. I do know the answer cannot be a perpetuation of the winner take all. It cannot be that, you know. It has to be that the Bahamas is for Bahamians.
When you look at politics and politicians and even the proceedings of the House and Senate these days, how has it changed?
There is less order. There's the civility which you know, it's not there. And there seems to be a less concern about, I don't know if it's concern or if it's less understanding about the entire system which we follow. I don't think we quite understand it as much as we did before.
What was it like during the time that you served? You know, how are your counterparts in politics chosen? Was it just, hey, are you available? Come run. I mean, was it a full vetting? You know, how were the politicians, your counterparts of yesteryear, selected? And what was that like? Because it seemed that, you know, politicians were a lot more prepared to govern and to deal with the stresses. And I'm talking across the board, across parties. It just seems that the politicians of today are not prepared.
I can tell you, with respect to the women in our party, we were very, very aware of the fact that we did not know. And so we sought to be taught about our system of government. We would have meetings on the preparation of budgets. We would have meetings on the relationship between the public service and the legislature. We would have meetings on the various ministries. We had many meetings teaching what the government was all about, you know. We also had meetings on procedure in Parliament. We knew we knew that it was not Robert's rule book or whatever it is, that this was a special
Parliamentary procedure.
parliamentary procedure. And this is something which I again credit Mr. Ingram with. When we went in 1992, you had so many new people, like we have now. New people, persons who have never, some of them had not been sitting throughout any session of Parliament.
Never even been in the Senate. Yeah.
You know what I mean? And what we did, because of this going around, like I told you, to other countries, we knew who was the leading clerk of Parliament in the Caribbean, and we brought him here. And we had, I think it was a 3-week session, teaching all of our parliamentarians about the rules, the procedures, and all that. It's lacking. It's lacking now.
I also want to ask whether you think the fight for, or the move for the equality of women has slowed down.
In some respects, I think we've achieved much, and so we're a bit complacent. I think that's the way it was. There's been a new, like a revival, and I'm so pleased to see it, you know, and I hope.
There's even legislation that you talked about and wanting to bring to Parliament that is now back at the forefront that people are discussing again. So you talk about that re-energized base.
Yeah, and I pray God at last that it will pass. I hope so. And it will pass if we realize that we have to work together.
We meaning?
The women. We have to work together. It's like the suffragettes. Mary Ingram, when she became a party person, was a UBP. You know, they never talk about her, but Marion Stewart, she was a fierce labor woman, but she was a fierce suffragette. You know, and then there were the others who were PLP, but they had to come together. And Mary Ingram she's to be more than commended, because she knew that she was fighting for the right of women to vote, and she knew that when they voted, her party would lose. She knew it. But it was the right thing, and she was committed to women gaining the right to vote, and she fought.
It's very powerful to be committed to the cause, even though knowing that your party, will lose. What are you looking forward to? Or what would you hope to be the Bahamas of the next 50 years? The that of your children and your grandchildren, to a greater respect. What would you like to see the Bahamas be in 50 years? What is your hope?
I would like to see the Bahamas where Bahamians are in true economic ownership of the country, ownership and leadership. And I know that everything is globalization and all like this, and it's like you're moving away from it. But we can't talk about globalization when we're not in control. If we talk about that, then we're consumed. We're taken over, you know. And so I would like to see us with Bahamians in true ownership. I would like to see a Bahamas where persons find their voices and not somebody else's voice, where they find their voices and they speak for the change, and they speak for what they want the Bahamas to be like. And I would want to see a Bahamas where you're not condemned because your voice may be different from the majority of voices or what is said to be the norm, you know. And I would like to see a Bahamas with true national pride. You know, we're proud to be Bahamians. We're proud of our country. We're proud of our environment. We're proud of what is our culture and proud of our morals. That's what I'd like to see.
Dame Janet Bostwick, I think that is the perfect tone on which to end this interview. First of all, thank you for agreeing to come and sit. It's been a long time since the public has had an opportunity to hear from you in a space like this. So thank you for coming and sharing your story and parts of your story and sharing the development of this country. And we thank you for all that you've meant to this country. And sometimes I think we forget to honor those who have helped us to be where we are today. And so this is our way of saying thank you to you. A little premature in saying happy independence.
And happy independence. And thank you for all you do.
Thank you.
Thank you for.
Thank you.
We will have a history, a recorded history
Yes.
of so many things because of you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I appreciate it, and thank
Thank
you
you.
again. Dame Janet, we have come to the end, as we said, of our conversation here tonight. It was certainly a pleasure hosting you on the record, and we hope to see you back again very soon. And that's a wrap for this episode of our show tonight. Our topic, Dame Janet Bostwick, a first in Bahamian politics. Make sure to join us again next week when we will take on another topic that directly affects the lives of Bahamians. Until then, I'm your host, Jerome Sawyer. We'll see you again.